Hello everyone, welcome to Green.io, the podcast for doers, making our digital world greener, one bite at a time. Whether you work in tech, product, data, design, marketing, you name it, you will find inspiration with us for your next actions in web sustainability and green IT. In this first episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Fershad Irani, the web performance expert who audited the COP26 website. He is a restless advocate for low-carbon web in his newsletter Optimized. He helps environmentally conscious companies ensure their websites are fast and have a low-carbon impact. Based in Taipei, after graduating in Sydney, Fershad also contributes to open-source projects like Open Space Data, and he is an active member of the climateaction.tech community, where I discovered his work. Welcome, Fershad. Thanks a lot for joining Green.io today.
Welcome, Gail. Thanks for the intro, mate.
First of all, talking about the intro, what did I forget to mention about you?
You covered most of it off. I think on the personal side of things, I enjoy rugby, so you'll probably find me on the weekends and nights watching a bit of rugby league or rugby union on a live stream. I also play touch football, so I represented Taiwan at the Touch World Cup a couple of years ago, and I help organise a bit of touch football over here. And just a recent thing that I've been getting into more and more, kind of bit of work, bit of side project, has been looking at the environmental impact of third parties as well. So I recently launched a project around that, which has been quite interesting. Learned quite a bit in that process as well.
You're talking about IMI third parties green.
Yeah, I'm talking about that one, mate.
Okay, great. I think we will come back to this later. Maybe first, that did you become interested in the sustainability of our digital sector in the first place?
I think like a lot of people that have picked up, especially in the last few years, it kind of goes back to Jerry McGovern and his book Worldwide Waste. I can't remember. Time is a blur now. These last few years, I can't remember where I became aware of that book, and I don't know how it ended up on my e-reader, but I started reading it and just going through it chapter by chapter. You know, he starts with a topic and you find yourself thinking, oh, yeah, I kind of understand. I kind of know a bit about whatever. And then by the end of the chapter, you find that your mind has just been completely blown by the environmental impact of whatever he's been talking about. And so definitely it started there.
This book is a bit like you knew about it but you didn't realize it. And then suddenly you've got this kind of wow effect. I think pretty much everyone who read it had it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people would share that feeling about this book. And for me personally, as someone that works in the web, I kind of found myself for a little while afterwards thinking like, okay, he's talked a lot about the impact of the internet and the impact of video and media and different parts of the ecosystem, but what can I do? And I was wrestling with that for a short while after that. And then I think I heard something from Tom Greenwood when he was talking about how Whole Grain Digital approach projects with clients and how they just build websites, and those websites that they build just happen to be green. Some of their clients don't even come to them asking for green websites, but they just build them that way. And that kind of clicked with me that I enjoy web performance and I enjoy making websites fast. And then a lot of the stuff that we do to make websites faster would also make websites greener just by default. So that was kind of the whole starting process for me down this journey. And it's one where you're always learning. You know, web performance on its own is like a field that's just constantly developing. There's so much to learn in that area just alone. And then web sustainability on top of that. It's a young area of study, and new research is coming out every month, about it. So there's always a lot to learn there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That what makes it absolutely fascinating, I guess. Talking about web performance and web sustainability, Green.io is about sharing hands-on experiences on how to make the web and tech more sustainable. And you mentioned your mission at Riedel, and the founder himself seemed very happy about the outcome. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So just before we dive into it, full disclosure, the founder and myself, Christian, and I, we worked together in a previous company. So we have some history going back. It wasn't like a fresh project that someone I don't know just came to me with. But yeah, so he was working on Riedel, which is a language learning app for folks that want to learn German. The approach with the app is a bit different from other language apps where it's very story focused, and you get a story to read, which is in German, and you also get the audio for that story, which you can then listen along as you're reading. So that helps you kind of with a bit of the learning there. When Christian first approached me for some performance work on Riedel, it was based around a desire to be faster as an app in some key markets that they were targeting. There was no real talk of sustainability in the initial project scope, and so we just set about doing what we needed to do to make the app faster in the areas where they wanted it to be. A few of the things we did, again, this goes back to how what we do in web performance kind of flows through to making the web more sustainable as a result. A lot of the stuff we did was just reducing data that was being requested when the app was launched. So we managed to shave around 200 kilobytes off the initial app launch. So, when you look at that from a sustainability perspective, if you want, it's slightly under or around 1 gram, 0.1 grams of CO2. So at scale, the more users that are launching the app, obviously that impact becomes larger. But from a pure performance point of view, we were able to get back around 1.5 seconds off the app load time, which was fantastic considering that we didn't actually do anything overly complicated. It's just be a bit more critical about what data we're sending over the wire. And then from there, that was like a combination of removing some JSON requests or trimming down a few JSON requests, and also image optimization. And again, this is like all stuff that if you start poking around with how can I optimize my website, you'll find all that type of stuff coming up as well. And in doing that, we were able to kind of get the app to where they were happy with it in the regions that they needed it to be performing well in. And then subsequently, as happens with businesses and stuff, they had other priorities which they had to focus on. But we've been in touch during that period. And I think later this year, we do have plans to do a bit of work around their website and other online assets. And hopefully we can touch on the app again as well. And I think that's the evolution for a lot of businesses, or that will be the evolution for a lot of businesses, in that, unfortunately, I don't have people coming to me, knocking down my door saying, please, we want our website to be greener. I got people coming to me saying, I want my website to be faster, but I just want it to be green. But I think once we show the performance results, and once we start a conversation around, hey, by the way, did you know that we've also just reduced CO2 emissions by this much, or we've had this positive impact on the environmental performance of the app? Once we start those conversations, it kind of triggers a curiosity in people, and they can start to see results from it. So the next lot of work that we plan to do around Riedel, that does have a sustainability aspect to it, and they have actually asked for that, which is positive. So they've come to me.
That's absolutely great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's now some unexpected benefit from your second mission, which was absolutely not the case for the first one.
Absolutely. And to hear that from the customer side, rather than it being like, hey, by the way, did you know we did this? To hear the customer coming saying, I want my web assets to be faster, but I also want to look at what I can do to make them greener. That's fantastic. And I think a lot of businesses will have that two-step kind of evolution as they look at how they can green their digital assets.
And during this first mission, how did you manage the human side of the project? Because I guess not everyone was fully aligned on the need for more performance, etc. You sometimes get some tensions regarding the arbitrage. You mentioned JavaScript and image size, and they are, I would say, pretty emotional topic for designer and developers. So what did you do to bring all these people together, and did it work?
I think it did work. I mean, as I mentioned, like Christian and I, we've known each other prior to the project, so I kind of, he knows how I am and I know how he is. But then he did have a developer who I was meeting for the first time on that project, and it was more just around kind of educating, like not saying, hey, this is wrong, this is garbage, whatever, like not being dogmatic about things, but just educating that, if we can make these reductions in the amount of data being transferred when the app loads, we will see performance gains regardless. And then just taking it out a step further and using a CDN for caching some resources, or optimizing some resources even, that'll give us an even bigger gain. And in terms of communicating with Christian, I think it's just at a human level, communicating the value of having a greener product, having a greener app, an app that is more low carbon, and as a result is faster as well.
Mm-hmm. And what tools did you use to achieve those results?
I'll mention one thing that we didn't implement in that project, but I think we might look to implement coming up this year, which is around the audio improvements. So I was recently made aware of a post from Björn Aldrup, and he wrote a post about reducing the bit rate of audio files and seeing the same quality audio, but at a much for a much smaller file size. And that's something that we didn't really look at in the first project. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm aware of that, I think it's something that I will bring up with those guys for future work, because not only will it help with audio playback time, so that's a big part of the app, is the user engaging with the audio to learn words and stuff. But it will also it'll help them in terms of their operating costs, I think, where smaller file sizes mean reduced cost of storage, reduced cost of accessing the data and downloading it. I think there's overall benefits that can be gained by that. And, I think it's a long-winded way of saying the community is the resource. Björn is someone that I have never met in my life, but I connected with him on Twitter and LinkedIn, I think around the COP26 article that you mentioned in the intro. And I've learned so much from just his posts. I've learned so much from other people in the community, and then you can take those things and apply them to your own use cases in their own projects that you're working on, and that's where I get a lot of my information and learning from, because it is really impossible to keep up with everything that's going on just by yourself,
Yeah, and that's the very purpose of this podcast as well. This is why we will put in the description all the links to these very valuable resources. Thanks a lot. Now you mention it, yes, of course, another use case made some noise last year when you decided to audit the COP26 website. Why did you do that?
I don't know. I was bored.
Just a crazy idea on Saturday night.
Yeah, I was just bored and curious, I think, and that's, I get myself into a bit of trouble like that sometimes. It was just like I had this thought with COP was coming up and it was everywhere, like COP26 this, COP26 that on the news, on Twitter and everything, and I just thought, what does their website look like? Because that's what I do, right? I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an engineer. I don't have a SaaS product around solving climate change, but I do stuff on the web. So I wondered, what does their website look like in terms of its sustainability and its environmental footprint? And digging through that, I learned a lot personally about the web, and I think sharing that with the broader community also kind of just gave visibility at a time when it was a hot topic. It gave visibility to digital sustainability and web sustainability as well. And it was really good to see, though, the reaction from the gov.uk folks who, when after the article was published, it did take a while because, governments and bureaucracy and which team owns what, but we did get there in the end in terms of reducing the size of at least the biggest culprit at the time of my audit was that was a large image in the footer. It was almost like a 3 megabyte graphic in the footer. And we managed to get the size of that down quite considerably. And they managed to push that change, I think, in the first week of COP. Since then, they did have like a lot of social media embeds and stuff on their site as well. And since then, there's been an article by Michelle Barker on Smashing Magazine's website about that and, reducing the impact of social media embeds, because it's something I noticed when I looked at their site, but, COP's Twitter feed and everything wasn't as active as it was. It wasn't as active as it was later on in the event, so it was still not that big of a contributor. But once you start having videos coming in from social media and stuff, you can really blow out the size of your website. So I've when I did the audit, I think it was a week before COP26 that I had a look at it. I'm kind of wishing I did it earlier, because some of those things that I highlighted in that article could have been fixed, but they needed a redesign of the overall site. Like the social media element of it could have been addressed, but they would have needed to redesign how that homepage looked.
Very valuable insights and links and documents being shared here. What advice would you give to someone willing to do the same kind of audit as you did for a pro bono or a professional mission?
I think, and this is not just for audits, I think this is just in general with how we talk about digital sustainability, performance, and all those types of things where you're looking at someone's work and giving a bit of a critique. Don't be dogmatic about it. Saying in black and white, this is right, this is wrong, that's a surefire way to turn someone off and not get your message across. There's a lot of grey, there's a lot of edge cases, there's a lot of situations which you might not be aware of that people are dealing with when they're making websites, when they're making apps. Especially time pressure is probably the biggest of them. So rather than going at it with a black and white, this is right, this is wrong, what you've done here is so bad, it's heinous, it's a crime against the environment. Go at it with a bit of empathy, go at it with an open mind, and don't be afraid to ask the question of why did you do this?
And is measuring helpful as well? I'm of course thinking about page speed insights, for instance, from Google or other solution as well. Does put hard numbers on the table actually helps or scares people?
I think it can help, but there can sometimes be there can sometimes be too many numbers. And, I say this as someone who's really started looking at perf, in the last couple of years. There are so many acronyms, and even in the sustainability space, there's just so much you need to be aware of and you need to understand in order to be able to digest the numbers you're looking at. So I think measuring does help. And something like Website Carbon does this really nicely. The way they present the results, it's not overpowering. It's almost playful, even when your site is very polluting. It's almost playful the way that they present that to you, and it's
a call for action rather than a judgment.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful. Presenting a whole bunch of numbers to a group of marketing executives, you're probably not going to get too much buy-in from that. But if you're able to pick out selective metrics and measure them against their business impacts, that's where you start to really reach and be able to communicate better with non-technical folks in companies. It's a bit harder in the sustainability space, though, because a greener website doesn't equate to anything, other than if your company's tracking maybe scope 3 emissions and you're tracking your website as part of that, then, okay, it does kind of correlate. But, if you can tie performance to sustainability, you can then take that back a step and go, well, for every 100 milliseconds we improve our performance, we are reducing our carbon footprint by this much. We're also increasing our revenue by this much. I think being able to communicate things in that manner is very, very impactful and helps you communicate the importance of these things more easily with folks in other business departments.
Yeah, which brings me maybe to the challenging question, I would say, which is the beyond the beautiful scope 3, what about the why? My point is, did you find yourself in situations where making tech greener was not enough, like where you had to question the purpose of some digital services, if not entire companies?
I've never found myself in that situation in the work that I've done, but just in everyday life, you have companies like Facebook, Meta, that they've got a positive social impact. They've also got quite a substantial negative social impact, and you start to wonder, is digital really being put to its best use in these cases? I find myself a lot of the time, ever increasingly, I find myself feeling like digital is not the only solution. That, there are times when digital is one of the options, but that sometimes people view it as, oh, we need to digitize this and it's only going to be available 100% through an app. Whereas actually, to make it more accessible for everyone, elderly, people that don't have a phone, people that have limited access to data or whatever, to make that more accessible, you need to consider other options besides just digital. So I think it's looking at digital as one of the options, one of the solutions for any given problem, but not discounting others, even more traditional ones like a pencil and a paper. Just a recent example here in Taiwan, when COVID was picking up, and the government really jumped into the QR code check-in. So when you go to a restaurant or a shop, you check in with your phone, scan a QR code, and your details are captured. But what that did, and beyond that, they also made vaccine bookings and everything like that accessible through an online system. And you would get notifications by SMS and whatnot. That excluded a large chunk of the elderly population, who then had to rely on relatives or local community members to kind of help them. And very quickly
they were the most concerned about the epidemic. So
yeah, and just like something like that, thinking, okay, we got to digitize this. It's going to be more efficient if we do, but let's not forget that we need to keep this as something that should be accessible to everyone.
And going back to something you mentioned, one of your most recent non-profit work, you started to investigate how green are third parties. Could you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah. Again, this is one of those kind of, I was bored and I was curious kind of situations. So I don't know if your listeners would be familiar with the webpage, the Web Almanac. It's a set of articles that's put out it's put out every year. So it's a part of the HTTP archive, and it's been going for 3 years. It's kind of tracking, how is the web evolving and changing over time. And one of those chapters in that almanac is about third parties. And I was just, as you do on a weeknight, I was giving that a read, and I came across a couple of stats that were mentioned in that, which just blew my mind. Like somewhere in the vicinity of 94% of websites load at least one third-party script. Yeah, and third-party requests account for 45% of website traffic. So when I read that, my mind straight away went to, I wonder how much of this is actually coming from green servers. Like, what's the impact here? Are these third-party scripts, all of them hosted on green web hosts? In which case, that'd be fantastic.
It would be.
So I set about kind of trying to figure out how I would be able to understand that a bit better. and that's where Are My Third Parties Green was born. So I kind of, I also kind of wanted to play with some technology. So I wanted to try out SvelteKit, which is a framework for building web apps and websites. So I got to do that, whilst also scratching my curiosity as well.
Yeah, killing two birds with one stone, which is a terrible expression in regard of the biodiversity crisis that we are into. And today, this third parties audit website, is it focusing only on energy, or did you manage to go beyond and study a bit potentially the scope 3 to do their advertise their carbon footprint and beyond scope 1 and scope 2?
No, not really. Right now, it's still very much a side project that I'm slowly updating with different things that people have kind of requested when I can. The main focus is around green hosting. So I'm looking to see are the third party requests hosted on green web hosts. I use the Green Web Foundation's API as the source of truth for that. And I do put in a carbon score just as like a rough estimate of the first time this request is made, what would be the carbon impact of it? Because some of them, it's hard with third parties. Some of them are really well cached and they have a long life on the browser. Others, the cache expires within a minute. So if a user comes back to your site 2 minutes later, they'll have to download the fresh one again. So it makes it a bit trickier to give a real accurate carbon estimate. But I do have another project in my head about that I'll leave that for another day. But yeah, so I do have a couple of plans to make some of this data more accessible and visible to people that might be deciding to use third parties on their website. I've got a branch in the code at the moment to create a directory of at least of the known third parties. So if you're looking for an advertising provider, you could kind of look through that list and see which ones are hosted on green web hosts and what would be the CO2 emissions related to that request. So I've got that directory. Yeah, and it just makes it an easier way for people to kind of compare, because at the end of the day, for us to make a difference as individuals, we can speak through our actions, and the more of us that go to third-party providers that are hosted on green web hosts, and the more of us that make that known, that was part of our decision, the more we'll see these providers shifting to more sustainable web hosting, optimizing their scripts so that they're lighter and better cached and all that stuff. So yeah, I do have plans to add to the website with a directory, maybe with a bit of a comparison, even inside of the test results. So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, but I'm not sure about getting into something more complicated like Scope 3, Scope 2 emissions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a hell of a job to start auditing and just collecting the information when it is made available, which is pretty rare these days.
Yeah, no, I just if any of the listeners do want to help with that, they can go over to aremythirdpartiesgreen.com and run their website through the tool to see how their website looks. And I've got some ideas about how I might be able to use this data to also contribute back to some of the data sources that I'm using. So I use a library called Third Party Web, which kind of categorizes the third-party requests. I would love to use data from this tool to then feed back into that library to help make it more complete, so that the other people that use that tool as well can benefit from that.
One, maybe two last questions, but more general questions, I would say. Okay, today, what makes you optimistic about our path toward a greener digital world?
I'm going to answer this.
Spontaneously, not that much. A bit scary.
No, I was just thinking, I think my answer is not just for digital. My answer goes for our path towards a greener, more sustainable world as a whole. The thing that makes me the most positive is like just the number of incredibly smart people that are working on the science behind changes that we need, that are working on the engineering, that are working on products to help us get there, that are lobbying for changes to be made at the government level. Just a number of people that are out there helping us move in the right direction. That's what gives me a great sense of optimism. I mean, going beyond the digital space, another podcast I listen to is it's called My Climate Journey by Jason Jacobs, and he interviews people from all kinds of different industries, and like some of them you wouldn't even think of, but you can just see that the scope of not only what's required, but the spaces in which people are operating across a gamut of industries, and that's what we need in the end to move things on a sustainable path, you know, and that trickles down to digital, mate. I mean, there are people out there way smarter than I am tackling the problem of sustainability across the digital sector, and knowing that they're working on it and knowing that they're open to assistance from the community, that kind of gives me hope.
Yeah, me too. It's pretty crazy when you start to investigate the level of knowledge, but still, and that will be my last question. We still have a lot of newbies when it comes to web sustainability, people with great aspiration, willingness to change, but not that much knowledge yet. What would be your recommendations to learn more about web sustainability and web performance to this audience?
I think just read or consume as much as you can, you know? I mean, like, there's a lot of content out there on YouTube. Climate Action Tech has got their YouTube channel, which is a lot of videos across a lot of different aspects of technology. So maybe you're not a web developer, but you work in machine learning. They've definitely got videos up there about machine learning, AI, cloud computing, data centers. So just consume. There's so much information out there. There's so much knowledge. Obviously, subscribe to this podcast because it's going to be a good one. But
thanks.
Also, I think getting involved in community is quite important. Like, the amount that I've learned since being a member of the Climate Action Tech community online, like the people you meet, the things they share, that helps you kind of stay aware of what's going on as well, because things do change pretty quickly. And, you know, having a community around you to kind of help you keep an eye on things that you might not be able to otherwise, that helps you ensure that you're always learning something.
Yeah, it definitely does, because I remember when I joined, like, there's a Slack workspace can be pretty intimidating. There's just so much information, but at the same time, suddenly you don't feel alone. Like you feel 10 times stronger that you were just a second before, because you realize, as you say, that so many great people are contributing. I really do love climateaction.tech, and not the least because this is where I met you. But thanks a lot for all these very valuable insights. That was awesome. So thanks a lot, Fershad, for being with us today. Your insights and feedback were just great. I'm sure many of our listeners will find inspiration in it to help green the web and IT. So thanks again. And next month, we will go to London and meet Sandra Sido, the founder of Why Not Now and co-founder on the Climate Pitch. She is also an active member of the Digital Collage Association, and she will tell us everything about this great tool to raise awareness about the ecological footprint of the digital sector. And that's it. Thank you all for listening to Green.io. As you surely have noticed in this episode, Green.io is a non-profit podcast, so we rely on you to share it and rate it 5 stars on your favorite platform. My dear listener, you are our true communication power. And you are our scout as well. So feel free to contact me either via LinkedIn or via my website, gaeldres.com, if you have an interesting story to share, or if you know someone who should, in order to build a greener digital world.